We'll see you soon. Let's bring in Grahame Morris and Bruce Hawker, our regular Monday afternoon discussion with our political strategists. Good to see you both. Let's start with Troy Buswell.
Good to see you. What's it like to be father second time round?
Very, very good. You can't get the smile off my face, our little baby girl. So it's good to be back and not changing nappies all the time. Now, Grahame, Troy Buswell, the WA Treasurer, is gone. This was the latest in a fairly long line of indiscretions. Car accident. He's crashed into his front gate a couple of weeks ago. Now he's received some treatment in Sydney and Perth for what Barnett described as a mental health breakdown. And you don't want to make light of that. But did the Premier stick by this guy for too long, do you think?
No, look, I don't think so. And look, talking to all the people today, apart from his family, but those who have worked with Troy, the people who know him best, they say, look, as a boss, he's a beauty. As a treasurer, he was a good one. And as a bloke, he was entertaining. Yes, he was a larrikin. But they say when you put Troy, some grog and a car together, it just wasn't a good mix. And yes, he's got form. And sadly, I think the Premier had to accept his resignation. Everyone tells me that he has been getting treatment in the last couple of weeks. Clearly that hasn't worked yet. And I think everyone would cross their fingers because, some of these conditions you wouldn't wish on a dead dog. So
I think
he's really going to have some very, very special help. And you hope he comes out the other end as the good old Troy.
Look, I think you're right. That he must have something good going for him because, bra snapping, chair sniffing, all the things that are so often commonly linked with Troy Buswell, he keeps getting brought back. He was still the treasurer. He must have something going for him.
I was trying to think, have we ever had anyone in the federal parliament
who survives that
like
sort of thing?
Troy?
Who survives those sort of, the affair with the Greens MP? I mean, he's got. Is the problem that the Liberals in WA simply don't have enough senior talent?
No. The problem is that he's a good operator on his good days. He just has a few bad ones. No.
Because Christian Porter's gone.
He, on a good day, he's just too good to discard in any company, in any state government. It's just that he has had these problems and he's had one too many.
Yeah, Bruce, what do you make of this? This is a guy who has been through so many political dramas. Now he's gone. It is a sad end to a political career, you must admit.
Well, I certainly wish him all the best for a speedy recovery, as I think anyone would, David. So that must be said at the outset. On his political career, though, I mean, this fellow has had more political lives than a cat. I mean, it's incredible. Any one of the things that he was found to have done in his time as a politician would have been enough to get rid of most politicians. As you say, snapped the bra of a staffer, sniffed the chair a staffer had been in, was involved in an affair with a Greens MP, got caught up in a defamation action with that Greens MP further down the line, was convicted 9 times in 3 years for speeding, I think, when he was a minister. So, I mean, look
Transport Minister.
A Transport Minister. All these things would be enough just to knock anyone out of the ring, but for some reason he kept coming back in Western Australia. I think it had less to do with about him being a good bloke, and I think there are real questions about how good a bloke he was, and much more to do with the fact that he was a power broker inside the Western Australian Liberal Party and commanded, the numbers in almost all respects. I mean, he had to give up the leadership of the party for Barnett because of some of the things I've just been talking about.
Well, just on that, he did, and but he's still been brought back. And Colin Barnett, in many ways, reluctantly took the leadership in the first place, then went on, of course, to win the election, and he's been Premier now for a while. But who comes next? Christian Porter's gone federal. Troy Buswell's gone now. Kim Hames, the Deputy Premier, is, as I understand, retiring at the coming election anyway, the next election. There is a dearth of talent there. And, Bruce, is this something more broadly at the state political level that both parties are facing?
The lineup of state premiers around the country at the moment on the Liberal side is pretty ordinary, and normally when someone takes their party out of opposition, they're really steeled and they tend to be bigger than their party and more dynamic. You haven't seen that really anywhere in recent years with some of these leaders. I'm thinking back though to real strong leaders like Jeff Gallop in Western Australia, like Mike Rann in South Australia, like Bob Carr, Beattie. These characters were bigger than the party. You don't really see that at the moment, and I think that might have a lot to do with the quality of people who are going into state politics these days. There was a time when it was a really, seen as being a very important level of government. I'm not sure that enjoys that sort of reputation anymore, and I've got to say that there were people on the Labor side who've contributed very much to that reduction in its esteem. But Mark McGowan in Western Australia, the Labor leader, is a different category of leader altogether, and I think he's well placed for the next election.
All right. Well, funny that, Bruce, you mentioned all the Labor figures there as the great statesman of state politics. But, Graham, do you agree at all with the suggestion there that there is a challenge for the parties at the moment in attracting people to state politics?
In the West or everywhere?
Everywhere.
Well, no, I don't. Let's have a look at the two elections coming up on Saturday. The Tasmanian, Will Hodgman, is a tremendous leader. And in South Australia, blimey, a fellow who's only been there for one term has got his party into a very winnable decision. Just have a look at these two state elections. In South Australia, I can actually find, 4 or 5 seats. But the last time a government changed from Labor to the Liberals, I ran the campaign. And that was 20 years ago. The Libs governed for a while, and Labor has been in for 12 years.
A long time.
A long time.
I was going to get to this later. So what's your prediction? That the Libs
well, look, I can find the 4 or 5 seats quite easily. 6, 7 and 8, and they need 6. 6, 7 and 8 are quite awkward to find in that state. It's quite unusual. Even though South Australia, Labor's Premier, I never thought we would ever see a Premier again who would make Joan Kerner from Victoria look good. South Australians got one. Jay Weatherill is just
all right. And in Tasmania, what are you expecting?
Well, Tasmania, all the polls say that there ought to be a shift, but I've sort of stopped predicting Tasmania. When you've got an electoral system organised by those satirical comedians, Hare and Clark, you've got a problem. And look, Will Hodgman would make a fantastic Premier. And I think there's something about Tony Abbott is saying to everyone in Australia, before you come to Canberra with your hand out, fix your own house. Get your own house in order. And I think Tasmania's got to do that. They've had this rotten government for many, many years. It just doesn't work.
Bruce, just give me your predictions on what's going to happen then on Saturday in South Australia and Tasmania.
Well, I think it's going to be very tough for Labor in both those states, David, but I don't think it's because of the charismatic qualities of Will Hodgman or the fellow in South Australia whose name I can't even recall at the moment.
Stephen Marshall.
It's in part because, and a large part, I think, because Labor has been in office for a long time in both those jurisdictions. They won in Tasmania in 1998. I worked on that campaign, a lot of others as well. In South Australia it was 2002, and around the country it was the same story. Labor was in power in New South Wales for 16 years, and in Queensland it was about 12. So this was one of the real reasons why Labor lost quite comprehensively around the country. They were in for so long. We didn't lose an election between 1998 and 2008 at a state or territory level. It was remarkable. So obviously the pendulum was going to move back the other way, and that's what's probably going to happen in those states on Saturday.
All right, we're going to take a quick break because I want to get on to some other issues. The media landscape, yes, it's changed. Malcolm Turnbull has floated some suggestions for changing the media laws. He's copped a bit of flack, though, from his regional-based colleagues. I'll tell you what some of them are saying and where this is likely to end up. Stay with us.
You don't have to wait until the planets align to improve your super balance. IOOF, specialists in superannuation, investments and trustee services. To find out more, speak with your financial advisor today.
For healthy and growing babies like me, and me, and me, breast milk is best. With over 100 years of caring for babies, Nutricia has developed Care Toddler Milk Drink for when I'm ready to move on. It contains patented prebiotics, omega-3 and vitamin D for digestion, brain and growth. Care Plus Toddler. Feed their personalities.
You need a website. Why not do it yourself? Create your stunning website today. Go to Wix.com. It's easy and free.
So you think that chip won't crack? Believe me, every chip will eventually crack, and O'Brien Repair could be as little as a third of the cost of replacing the screen. And if you book online right now, you'll receive 10% off your chip repair. O'Brien.
Have you been up all night?
I'm looking for hotel deals.
Why didn't you just go to Hotels Combined? They compare hundreds of travel sites in seconds.
Hotels Combined.
Find the best price in seconds at hotelscombined.com.
Switch your credit card to Virgin Money now, and with the Virgin Australia Velocity Flyer card, you'll get 0% interest per annum for 14 months on balances transferred.
If you're paying 20% interest on a $7,000 balance, you could save over $1,500.
Plus, earn Velocity frequent flyer points on your everyday purchases and reward yourself with flights, accommodation and much more. Reward yourself today with 0% per annum for 14 months on balance transfers and earn Velocity points on your everyday purchases. For great savings and rewards that really take off, apply now. Call 13 21 33 or visit virginmoney.com.au/fly.
Welcome back to the program. It's around 20 years since the media laws were put in place by the Keating Labor government. Media's changed a lot in that time. The eruption of the internet, the arrival of channels like this one and many others. It has transformed the media landscape. Malcolm Turnbull, yesterday here on Sky News on Australian Agenda, was suggesting some reforms that he's thinking of, considering, talking to the industry about the cross-media rules, which prevent someone, an individual, owning all TV, radio and print in one market, and also the reach rule that prevents a TV network being able to reach 100% of the country. It prevents Channel 9, for example, buying a regional TV station. So these are the things they're looking at. There's been some resistance, though, from country-based MPs today, Nats and some Libs as well, although a couple that I've spoken to this afternoon have said they are feeling more comfortable after assurances from Malcolm Turnbull today. They will look after local content. They want to see the letter of the legislation that's going to be put forward, but they're feeling more comfortable about this. The Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, also asked about this again today. Here was his response.
The media world has changed beyond recognition over the last couple of decades, and it's important that regulation evolve to match the changing environment. Now, we're not rushing to change regulation. If and when we do seek to change regulation, it will be in a deregulatory direction, because that's the instinct of this government.
In other words, it's not going to be put forward in a couple of weeks when the government holds its first regulation repeal day, but it is something they are going to keep working on. Labor's taking a wait-and-see approach. They want to see just exactly what the government puts forward, but they are open to, and flagged this when they were in government, changing that reach rule in particular. Here was the Shadow Minister, Jason Clare.
Let's wait and see whether the government comes up with any serious proposals or not. Labor has got an open mind. We're happy to talk to industry as well as the general public, about whether reform is needed in this area. I see that there's a fight brewing between the National Party and the Liberal Party on these reforms. I think the government needs to get its own house in order and work out what policies it wants to put to the Parliament, and we'll be happy to consider them then.
Grahame Morris, is there a case for changing these media laws?
There's certainly a case to have another look at them. And I think I watched the exchange between Malcolm Turnbull and Paul Kelly on Sky yesterday. And, you know, it is just extraordinary to watch Malcolm Turnbull do his job. You know, it's been decades since we had a communication minister who could communicate. You know, he understands his issue. He can explain it. He was talking about, you know, the ups and downs of both sides of the argument. And he was saying, here are a couple of principles that we will make a decision on. And it was just showed you how really, really good Malcolm is at explaining things and that he's on top of something. You know, compared to his predecessor, complete goose. Look, the coalition will have another look at this, and I think things have changed. Yeah, look, I understand the regional thing, but even in Canberra, which is deemed regional, you know, some of the television news comes out of Wollongong. So, you know, even... And
some of the television news is barely existent on one of the networks as well.
Some of the networks, they don't have it at all. So, you know, some of the regional fellows cannot, you know, aren't in as strong a position as they used to be because they've woken up themselves that sometimes local people don't care. And anyway, what on earth is the ABC for if it's not providing local content? But
sure. But I mean, yes, local content's important here in Canberra, but I think in a lot of country towns as well. We still have, you know, a local newspaper, the Canberra Times. It's a pretty strong local paper. In a lot of country towns, they need their local news bulletins. They need their local content.
They've got local newspapers and they've got the ABC. You know, there are many. You know, if you are a small town, you don't have a local news. You know, you get the regional news or you get the Sydney news or the Perth news. You don't actually, you know, not everyone has local news. But look, I'm sure the coalition, and it doesn't matter whether it's the country Nats or the country Libs, but there'd be a lot of them saying, look, hang on Malcolm, hang on government, can we just make sure that there is something in there for local content? But some of the ownership laws just seem silly to me now when we have so many things on the internet that we can get our news from, and yet we're saying to these poor people who want to employ journalists and spend a hell of a lot of money and create the news, sorry, you can only do that with on one hand and on one leg.
And what about the cross-media rule? Would you have any problem with News Corp or Fairfax or Channel 9 owning all three, owning TV, print and radio?
Look, I wouldn't anymore. Because, you know, just have a look at the power of the ABC. It's across all platforms, you know, and I think the ABC almost needs a very powerful counter. But why shouldn't people who want to spend their money and employ people, why shouldn't they be able to own a television, a newspaper and a radio thing? If nothing else, it's efficient.
Yeah, well, Bruce, what do you think? A couple of issues, and let's break them apart there.
And, you know, why shouldn't, for example, Sky be allowed to be a free-to-air television news service if it wants to be? Why not?
All right, well, Bruce, let me get your thoughts on a couple of issues there. Firstly, on local content, and this goes to that reach rule, whether Channel 9 or 7 or 10 should be able to buy a regional affiliate and broadcast to everyone. Is that a problem? Because Labor did try and move down that path themselves, or flag it at least.
Yeah, I don't think it's as big a problem as the media concentration concerns that I would have, and I think a lot of Australians would have. I think that's really where most people's anxieties are. You could, I think, guarantee certain, you know, local content and so forth. That wouldn't be the concern.
You could build it into the legislation, couldn't you?
You could. I don't think that's really the issue that most people would take issue with. I noticed that Malcolm Turnbull took the opportunity to say that he thought that Rupert Murdoch was his favourite plutocrat in the world at the moment, and I think that's probably where some of the anxiety would really reside. You see the way in which he runs news limited outlets. You saw their role in the last federal election, and you know, the highly politicised way in which Murdoch runs his operations. You don't see that with 7 and 9 and 10 and Sky. You know, they're pretty straight operators. I don't
so
know
you'd
that
be
we would
worried
see
about any change that could allow news. I mean, news technically could buy Channel 10 at the moment because they don't own radio. Lachlan Murdoch does, and he's on the board, but you would have a problem with any change that would allow news to buy or to operate all three?
I most certainly would, and I think most Australians would too, because in diversity in media, and we're not a big media market, we do have an opportunity for countervailing positions to be heard and to be put forward, and I think that's a really important thing in any democracy. This idea that the internet has suddenly changed the ground rules completely, I think is nonsense. You know, if the Liberal Party thought that that was the case and the internet and social media was the big powerful vehicle that they're making it out to be for the purposes of this discussion, they would have put all their political advertising into it in the last federal election. They didn't. They still used free-to-air and pay TV to prosecute their cases because they know that still that's where most people get their news from.
Just quickly on that, Graham. That's a fair point, isn't it? Yes, the internet has changed a lot of things. Social media has, and you're even on Twitter. It's changed all sorts of things, but it's often the chatter on social media is based on what journalists, mainstream, old media organisations have dug up and written.
Well, that's true, but look, and then everyone expresses an opinion, and you've got 100 opinions on the one opinion. But you know, unless we do something soon, you might not have a Fairfax in this country. You know, and Rupert at some stage may give up on the Australian newspaper. He used to own Channel 10 and had to get rid of it. You know, why? Why, in this time when it's really, really hard to run a news organisation at all, why do you want to cut the throat of the people who are prepared to do it? And I just think it is about time we had another look at this. Thank goodness there's somebody sensible at the reins like Malcolm Turnbull. We may end up doing nothing. But it's time to have another look because the rules of the game have changed dramatically.
We're going to have to wrap things up there. We are out of time. But I'm looking forward to your thoughts next week on the wash-up from Tasmania and South Australia. Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker, good to talk to both of you. We'll take a break, then back with more on PM Agenda. We've got a new report out today about just how